Anandadhara, I'd like to start with the name of this concept, Anandadhara. This actually, the name comes from one of the famous poems of Rabindranath Tagore in Bengali. The name of the poem itself is Anandadhara. It starts with Anandadhara, Bahole, Bobhoche. It's an amazing poem. It's written in Bengali. The concept of the meaning of the poem is that Ananda Dhara is the flow of joy or stream of joy or a stream of bliss which encompasses the whole world. Then it goes to the sun, the moon. It is kind of a flux which goes and covers the entire universe. So basically, according to this Tagore's mystic poem, we are all inside this Anandadhara. We are inside the bliss, the flow of bliss or the stream of bliss. That's an amazing concept actually. So I really like that concept. That is how we adopted the name Anandadhara for this concept. Again, I want to make it something very clear. We don't want to dogmatize it. Anandadhara is a concept, it's a style of living, it's an art of living, and it is not being dogmatized or it is not attached to or affiliated to any religion or anything like that. So let us make it very clear in the beginning, okay? Now, the concept of Anandadhara or the ideology or the philosophy of Anandadhara comes from one of the very important slokas, verses of Bhagavad Gita. Sloka 2, chapter 2, sloka 40. It goes like this, verse number 40 of chapter 2. Nehabhikramanashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahado bhayat. The meaning is that in this path, there is no restriction, or in this path, the effort is not wasted. Abhikrama means effort, the karma what you are doing. In this path, the abhikrama, the karma is not wasted, and pratyavayona vidyate, and there is no hindrance. Okay, so this is the flow which is equated to what Tagore's mystic poem. So this is the flow or the stream of joy, and no effort is wasted. That means it's an effortless flow, and whatever your action within the flow is absolutely effortless. There is no energy or no force attached to that because it is a natural flow. Okay, and no hindrances. There is nothing which hinders this flow. That means this is a laminar flow. If you look at the fluid dynamics way, it is a turbulence outside and laminar flow inside. So in the laminar flow, everything is effortless. So that is, and also the second part of the sloka says, Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahado bhayat. That means even if you are little bit in this dharma, I am coming to that, what is dharma? Little bit in this flow or in this path, Trayato Mahadevaya, you're going to cross over the greatest fear. When you talk about fear here, you should think, especially in the Eastern philosophy or Eastern literature, we represent one single word to cover the entire system. For example, Indriyas. If you're talking about Netra Indriya, if any slokas in Bhagavad Gita or any other spiritual text says Netrendriya, you should understand that it covers all the Panchendriyas, all the 5 Indriyas. Like fear is, when we say fear in this particular sloka, it is not only fear, it is any negative emotions. You know, the negative emotions are fear, anger, disgust, jealousy. All these negative emotions are covered in that particular word called fear. And fear also can be, in a little bit broader sense or in a macro level, you can see that the master of fear, the mother of all fears, is the fear of death. So, Trayate Mahadobhayat means if you are in the path, dharmasya, swalpam apyasya dharmasya, I'm coming to dharma later. So, swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahadobhayat. So, when you are in this path, once you are in the path, it is also called dharma. You're crossing the greatest fear. It can be interpreted as the fear of death, which is the mother of all fears. So, that means once you cross the fear of death, all the other fears automatically disappears. Okay. So, let us talk about dharma. So, all these slokas talking about dharma. So, what is dharma? Dharma starts from the root of the word dharma, or in Sanskrit we call it the bija or the dhatu of the word dharma is thr dhatu. Thr means holding or putting together. So dharma actually in Sanskrit the words are not, they don't have any literal meaning and any root meaning, which the word is always goes back to the root of the word and then it originates from that particular root and diverts it into different meanings. Okay, so dharma when we talk about is not we can interpret as righteousness. That is what most of the interpreters do. Dharma is considered as righteousness, right way of living or whatever. But in this particular concept, especially in the Bhagavad Gita sloka, dharma solpamapi yasya dharmasya trayate mahado bhayat. Here, dharma means the way of life, or rather the art of living, the way of living, the right way of living. So if you are in this right way of living, you automatically in the dhara, you're automatically in the flow. And what is that flow? Neha Bhikrama Nashostri. No effort is ever wasted in that flow. So that's a wonderful sloga of Bhagavad Gita. So what I'm trying to say is that we have adopted the system of Anandadhara, the name from Tagore's mystic poetry, and the concept from ancient Indian literature, ancient Eastern wisdom, I would say. Bhagavad Gita sloga is only one of the, just an example basically, but inspired from the sloga. But we're basically looking at the ancient Eastern wisdom. So when I say ancient Eastern wisdom, it covers Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and all kinds of philosophy is originated in the eastern part of the world. So this is, you can say that it's a kind of a syncretic concept, and not affiliated to any particular religion. No religious practices or any kind of something which is affiliated to related to religion we don't accept in Anandadhara, because Anandadhara is basically an idea or a concept which helps people, which helps to bring world peace to the world, and it starts from individual. If a society has to be good, it starts from the individual. If individual is good, then automatically the society is good. There is no physical entity called society. It's a group of people together we call society. Okay, so that is the whole concept. So happiness, pleasure, success, peace, stress, the removal of stress, all these things are in the dhara. So once you are in the dhara, your flow is confirmed, your flow is effortlessly. Okay, so now we are talking about come a little bit further, and why, if this is the default state of a human being is happiness, then why this is not being followed? Why we cannot uncover or discover our true self, which is dhara, which is in the dhara, which is happiness? We are not discovering it, because the world, all these acharyas says, Buddha says, Buddha says the second noble truth of Buddha is that the world is full of sufferings. So Adi Shankara says, Lokam shokaha tam cha samastam. The world is full of sorrow. Bhagavad Gita also says, Alaya dukhalayam ashashwadam. This world is dukhalayam ashashwadam. It is a warehouse of dukkha, warehouse of sorrow, and ashashwadam, temporary or impermanent or transient. So everybody says that, Buddha says, Shankaracharya says, every philosophy says that this is full of sorrow. What you're seeing is full of sorrow. Buddha gives solution actually. Buddha says there is the world is full of sorrow. There is a way of coming out of it. There is Ashtanga Marga he is suggesting. So even Shankaracharya has good solution to this. So every acharyas who says, or every philosophy which says the world is full of sorrow, there is a solution to it. And what is the solution? It's very interesting actually. The solution to come out of the dukkhas or sorrow is to rebel against the natural selection. Because what happens is that we are here as human beings. We have evolved over, maybe since bipedal, it must have taken 2.5 million years from being bipedal, from being bipedal to where we are now. It has taken at least something like 2.5 million years. So all these years our brain was evolving. Our brain was evolving from a primitive brain or a smaller brain to larger brain with more cognitive functions, more cognitive capacities, more reasoning capacities. All those, that is where we are standing now. Okay, so but again the problem is that our brain has not evolved in the pace in which our society developed, or our technological advancement, or our cultural advancement. The brain always lags behind the cultural advancement. So this is why all these philosophies, all the acharyas, including Jesus Christ or Buddha or Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Vyasa or whoever has written that, all says that you have to revolt against this animal instinct. So there is another important slogan in Mahabharata. Ahara nidra bhaya maithunam cha samanyametat pashugir narana. Ahara nidra bhaya maithunam cha. That is food, sleep. Bhaya is fear. What I said is the emotions. Okay, you can call it emotions in general. And maithunam is procreation, creative activity. Ahara nidra bhaya maithunam cha samanyametat Pashubir Naranam, that is for the animals and human being, this is common. Samanya method, it is common. Tharmo hitesham adhigo vishesho, the second part of it. Tharmo hitesho adhigo vishesho dharmena hina pashubir samana. So there is something called dharma which makes the human different from the animals, and without this dharma, the human being is similar to animals. This is the concept. Okay, so basically what happens is that we have to get out of the animal instinct. In Shaivism, especially Kashmiri Shaivism, Abhinav Gupta's Kashmiri Shaivism, we are talking about 3 different stages of human consciousness. That is Pashu level. When in ancient Indian system, when you talk about Pashu, I know the meaning of Pashu in Malayalam is cow. When you talk about Pashu, it's not just cow. It is animal kingdom in general, starting from a bacteria or a virus, all the way up to the biggest animal, elephants or whales or whatever. That is combinedly called Pashu. So, Pashu, Veera, Daiva. These are the 3 levels of consciousness they're talking in Shaivism, in Kashmiri Shaivism in general. So what happened is that the lower level of consciousness is Pashu, is animal. So that is what Mahabharata sloka says, that Ahara, Nidra, Bhaya, Maidhunam. All these 4 elements are in every living being. Every living being has got this. So animals has got this, humans have got this. But that is the common thing between animals and human. So what makes us different is the dharma. And what makes us different, that dharma is what we call thara. Okay, so what makes us different from the animals is the thara. So here, when I talk about revolting against or rebelling against the natural selection, what happens is that the natural selection has brought us here because of the only just 2 reasons. One is that we have to survive. The individual has to survive. The individual survival is actually translated to the survival of the society. So, sorry. So when we come to individual survival, number 1 reason for evolution, for us to survive. Without we surviving, evolution doesn't happen. Our species will not, genes will not carry it forward. Okay. The second one is obviously procreation. Survival and procreation. Just 2 things. This is what natural selection does to all beings, whether it is a human being or animal or a tree or a plant or whatever. So these are the 2 basic things. So what happens is that whatever we do, so here this is when you come to neuroscience, we're talking about, there is a theory called triune theory of brain. The brain has been divided into 3 parts, not physically, but for the study of, for the purpose of studies. Neurology, early neurologists actually, maybe late 20th century, early 20th century, 21st century neurologists have tried to study the brain and the emotions, the behavior with 3 parts of the brain. That's called the triune part of the brain. And the lower level of the triune part of the brain is what we are talking about in the scriptures as animal, as Pashu. That means the lower part of the brain is basal ganglia and the brainstem. It is also called the reptile brain. So reptile brain has got only these 2 things, as I mentioned earlier, that is either procreation or survival. Okay. The second level, the next level is limbic system. This is how our system evolved. So limbic system, when you talk about limbic system, we are already reached 2.5 million years back when we started bipedal, standing up. That is the time our ancestors has already developed the limbic system, because limbic system helps to survival. Because fear is very important part for survival, because we are, as human beings, were one of the very weakest and feeblest animal in the kingdom, because we evolved from African savannas, and African savannas is full of dangerous animals. Okay, and as human beings, we do not know how to climb a tree properly. We don't know how to swim. We have no teeth or nails to fight with other animals, and we can't even run faster. So the only thing we need is that emotion developed, and that emotion is fear. Okay, so when we get the emotion of fear, we take action immediately. So the limbic system is the second part which is developed, and the third part is obviously the prefrontal cortex, which is happened here behind our forehead. That is called prefrontal cortex. And prefrontal cortex is actually what made us human. What made us human in the sense that is the seat of rational thinking, that is the seat of cognitive reasoning, and that is the seat of language processing, because we human being is only animal or only being who can process language. So these are the things this is how we develop. This is the triune theory of brain. But what has happened is that, okay, up to here we are fine because our brain has developed into what it is now inside our skull now. I'm starting from bipedal ancestors, starting from like the fossil they found in Ethiopia, Lucy, 2.5 million years back. So if you take that from 2.5 million years and up to now, our ancestors were uh, foragers or hunter gatherers for almost 99.5% of the time, because we started settling down or started moving or started crossing oceans only maybe 10-20,000 years back, according to the anthropological evidences, you see. So what they say is that we started evolving, and 20,000 years back we started settling down, or 10,000 years, between 20 and 10,000 years back we started settling down with the agricultural revolution. And that is the time our way of behavior completely changed. From hunter-gatherer, from forager, from moving around without settling in a place, we started settling down, and then community developed, and society developed, and the government, kingdom, and all kinds of things developed just 20,000 years back. So, what is the significance of this evolution to this Anandadhara concept? So, evolution, what happened is that, so we are carrying a brain which is basically 99.5% of its time. It's a machine, okay? 99.5% of its time it was used to do a particular function. And most of this function have become irrelevant or obsolete during our time. But the machine doesn't know that. Machine has not been reprogrammed to adapt to this particular situation. That is where all these acharyas, all these gurus, and all these religious, you can't call religious leaders, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Shankara, Shiva, all this they were talking about is, you have to get out of this natural selection, the brain which is encoded with the natural selection, you have to get out of it. That is what Jesus says. Anger, it kills you. Get out of anger. If somebody hits you on the one side, one side of your face, show the other side. Because that is one thing you cannot do in an evolved brain. The brain which is evolved due to natural selection. Because when somebody hits you, then you know that it is a threat to you. You have to respond. So you have to react according to that. And reaction means hitting back or whatever. That is number one for survival. Okay, and desires, karma, is coming because of the desire of reproduction. It is desire of reproduction may be an umbrella, but a lot of other desires which is coming under that. High calorie food. The desire for high calorie food is to enhance your reproductive capacity, but that is not needed now. Even if you have 5 children, we still go for high calorie food and sweets and things like that. So that is not required now. So basically what I'm trying to say, sorry, we don't have much time to go into detail of evolutionary psychology and neuropsychology and how it is related to Anandadhara. So here what we are trying to say is that, so basically this coding is what we need to break if you want to be in the Dhara. There are methods of doing this. You have to break this coding. And this coding is what we call vasana in the Indian system. That is, vasana is basically your warehouse of information, warehouse of unwanted information. It's a kind of a Shannon entropy, which is because some information is got various outputs, but you don't even need any of them. So these vasanas are being stored in your subconscious mind, stored in your DNA, stored in your genes, stored in your memes. If there is genes and memes, memes actually you collect from your environment, and then that also plays a major part in your behavior. So the coding of your genes and memes are being stored in your system as vasanas. This is what is Buddhist, the Yogacara Buddhist call is Alaya Vijnana. Your Alaya is full of, your warehouse is full of crap actually. So you need to clean it up. Vasana Kshaya is one of the major tools Indian philosophy says to get out of this animal instinct, to get out of this natural selection process and escalate your consciousness to become human. And when you become human, that means you are always in the flow of energy, flow of dhara, dhara of bliss, the flow of joy. So as Tagore's poem says, So how do you get out of this Vasanakshaya? How do you use the Vasanakshaya? Vasana is actually, that is the warehouse of information, unwanted information, which you have to purge out, you have to take out periodically. So Patanjali Maharshi in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, he says there are 5 kleshas, 5 problems. How do you call it? Kleshas is actually 5 sufferings, 5 reasons for suffering we have. These 5 reasons for suffering also comes from our evolutionary genes and memes actually. Avidya, Asmida, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. These are the 5 kleshas. Avidya, Asmida, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha, Kleshaha. That is what. It's a second chapter, third aphorism of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Avidya, ignorance. Here comes Viveka. That means we don't know how to differentiate between good and bad. What is needed and what is not needed. Many of the things what we think that I need, I want this, is not really what you want. It is you've been asked or you have been programmed to look for such things. High calorie food, for example, I'm telling you. Social status, the big cars and things like that. This is all because of our memes. Social status is our memes because it evolved from our previous society needs that to become an important person for survival. Again, it distills down to these 2 things, survival and reproduction. So social status, all these things are, you have to differentiate between what is good and what is bad. What is bad is in the turbulence, what is good is in the laminar flow. What is good is in the dhara, what is bad is outside the dhara. That is how things work. And so this viveka, the differentiation between good and bad, what is needed, what is good for you, what is bad for me, what is good for the other person, what is bad for the other person, what behavior is good for you, what behavior is not good for you, what kind of language you should use, what kind of language you should not use. This is viveka or discrimination is a constant process throughout our life. That should happen if you discriminate between good and bad, what wants and dislikes. If you do that, that is avidya. Asmida is one of the important thing is asmida actually, very, very important, or one of the major problems what we have in life is that asmida. Asmida means asmi. You must have heard the aphorism aham Brahmasmi from Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi means I am the universe. I am Brahma, not the universe, sorry, I am Brahma. So I am. Asmida means the role you are playing in this world. Aham, what you call it? I am. I can attach my role to the job I am doing. Okay, I am manager Asmi, for example. I am a director Asmi. Or I am a father Asmi, it can be your role you're playing in the society, role you're playing in your. So what happens is that most of the time we get affiliated or attached to the role we are playing. We don't realize that, hey, come on, that is a role we are playing. That is the drama which is going on the stage. Yeah? But you identify, you must have seen many people, especially police officers and people who have power, they merge with their role completely. But role is also transient. One fine morning it disappears. If a police officer retires, then suddenly they lose everything. They lose the something which they're holding on to. So asmida is one of the important things we have to get out of to be in the dhara. Never be attached to the role. Never be attached to the role you're playing. Everything you're playing is a role. You're playing the role of the job you're doing. You're playing the role of your husband. You're playing the role of a wife. You're playing the role of your child, or your father of your children, or mother of your children. All these are role play. And this is happening in the stage. And you are the real witness is somebody beyond that watching this play is going on the screen. So it's like a screen. The actors are acting in the screen, but the screen is just a static thing. Once the picture goes off, the screen is there as it is. It was just images which is coming and going. So role play, asmita, is one of the major reasons for suffering according to Patanjali Maharshi. Then ragadosha, I already explained ragadosha while talking about discrimination. Raga is your likes and dosha is your dislikes. I want this is raga. I don't want this is dosha. That is also a reason for suffering. And the last one is abhinivesha. I think we started from there. Abhinivesha is actually the fear of death or clinging on to life, whichever way you can call it. And fear of death is the fear of mother of all fears, and all other fears are the fear of old age, fear of poverty, fear of rejection, fear of loss of love. All these individual fears are under the umbrella of fear of death. That is also because of our natural selection behavior, because we want to survive. Okay, so that is in a nutshell, that is what it is. That is what we should, where we should be, where we should come out of it. Okay, now what are the, it is easier said than done. We all know that, okay, this is how it is, you have to be in the dhara all the time, and then you should not do, you should not lie. We have been hearing about this since our childhood, but how to do that? How are we going to do that? One major tool is that meta thinking. That, as I said, whatever happening in our life is happening in a screen. Okay, is happening to the role you're playing. It is not actually happening to your true self. When you're talking about your true self is actually, it is something which is beyond you, your body and mind. Okay, your body and mind are ubadhis. It's a vehicle, or in Bhagavad Gita they say kshetram. So body and mind are ubadhis, of course. So what is happening beyond the body and mind? So you are seeing something beyond your body and mind. As I take a different vantage point and see what is happening. Okay, so for example, in positive psychology, they say that there is a lot of noise which is coming to us. If you are, they say that we have something like 11 million bits our brain receives per second in a normal situation. 11 million bits we are receiving per second, but out of which our conscious mind can process only 50 bits per second. So just imagine the massive amount of information what you're getting or hitting your subconscious mind, and the conscious mind can process only very limited amount of information package per second. So what happens to the other noise which is coming in, or even the information processing is also noise. Watching TV is a noise, actually you're exposed to noise. So this is kind of, you have to have a noise cancellation mechanism within you. This noise cancellation mechanism is what I'm talking about, meta thinking, thinking of thinking. So when you're exposed to a lot of noise around, how do you cancel all these negative emotions or negative, what do you call it, negative stimuli what you're receiving is all noise. You don't need noise, like this noise reduction headphone. It is basically what they do is the noise, the headphone actually process only the actual music what you're listening. All other noises, it just overlaps it. If there is it's like a sine wave. So if there is a crest, it overlaps with a trough. So it becomes neutralized. So like that, there are two aspects here. One is that all these noises goes into your vasana. It becomes your vasana shape, because your environment, the brain picks up all the negative signals, so that because our brain is inherently negative biased, because for survival. Okay, so all this negative information the brain picks up and it stores there and becomes vasana. So you may not even realize now there is something happening outside which your brain already picked up and stored as a danger. You don't know because you're listening to me now. Okay, because your other indriyas are again working. You're only listening through ear, but other indriyas are working, and the brain is also getting noise from this other indriyas as well and storing it. You may be processing only the information based on my talk or my words or my sound, the sound I'm generating. Okay, that's a different thing. So how do you get out of this noise? One main thing is that meta thinking is coming at that particular because thinking about thinking, whenever a thought comes up, you think that whether this thought is required or not. If it is a negative thought, you can also overlap it with a positive thought to finish it off. There is another aphorism from Patanjali in Yoga Sutra, amazing aphorism, I would say. It says, Vitarka Bhathane Pratipaksha Bhavana, the same concept. Vitarka Bhathane Pratipaksha Bhavana. So any information which is coming, which you think that it is not good for you, it is detrimental to your mental health or your being in the dhara, you overlap it with a positive thought. For example, if you're thinking bad about a person has done something bad to you, you can think that the 5 things that person has done for you which turned out to be good, knowingly or unknowingly. I'm sure that you can easily find out 5 things from any person who has done good for you. I mean, 5 good things has done for you. Any person whom you interact regularly. Okay, so maybe this one particular thing he did bad for you, the brain exaggerates it, enlarges it, magnifies it because of the survival instinct, and all these other 5 things brain will subside because that is okay, that is taken for granted. So you can pick it up, overlap it, and then eliminate it completely. That is what other methods are like expressing gratitude and then forgiveness and all those things are also works very well for cancelling the noise which is coming from outside. And so this is the meta thinking, is about thinking, viewing your role as separate from what you are. Okay, and so this is what basically you should do to be in the dhara. You cannot be in the dhara when you get upset or when you get stressed out by some of the noises which is coming from outside. Like another important thing is that you should not watch I always say that you should not watch TV at all. Stop watching news, because the news channels actually they bring only uh, negative news, because what they're selling is not news. They're selling is fear actually. So stop watching. Any important news will definitely will leak out and reach you for sure. So you're not going to lose anything by stop watching news, because you get information anyway. It's such a huge world, and there are a lot of people around you, a lot of other sources of information. So real information will always reach out to you. Don't worry. So stop watching news. That's one of the area of news. Is passive noise reduction. It's called active noise reduction, passive noise reduction. Then stopping watching news and cutting off all the unnecessary noises is active noise reduction. Passive noise reduction is vitarka badhana, pratipaksha bhavana. Okay, so that's fine. So now, okay, you're talking about meta thinking. You're saying that you don't think. You observe your thinking and then stop. So there is another way of doing it actually. The process is like this. This is the sequence. First, you receive a stimuli from outside. The stimuli creates a cue. The cue creates a thought, and thought creates emotion, and emotion creates action. That stimulus, cue, thought, emotion, action. This is the process that's happening in our daily life. So if you receive a stimulus from outside, stimulus actually comes, we have only 5 doors through which the stimulus can come inside. Okay, the stimulus comes inside the 5 doors, and when stimulus comes, you get a cue, and this cue is also against it again distills, crystallizes back to the natural selection. This cue is actually, it could be an exaggerated cue. You hear a small sound, and again it goes back to your vasana in your subconscious mind. Vasana, I told you, it is being accumulated mental impressions. So from the vasana, it picks up something and juxtaposes with the cue and says that, okay, this is a major threat. Maybe it can be exaggerated. It can be obsolete. Some of the cues may be even disappeared from your life completely, or it may be coming from your hunter-gatherer forager days, but you still consider it as a threat. It could be an absent cue. You may be hallucinating you're getting a cue. If somebody stares at you, you think your cue may be that this person is going to attack you. Maybe he's just looking blank and then he's thinking about something else. So this is called an absent cue. So there are different types of cues which you have to eliminate. So identify the cues, identify the stimuli, identify the cue. Then you have to put a gap between your the stimuli and the thought. And also the thought comes in. When the thought comes in, okay, the particular stimuli has created a thought, and still there is an opportunity. The thought turns into emotions. Emotions you can always feel in your body. Fear, anger, whatever emotions you can always feel in your body. So there is always a marker for emotions which you can always identify. So when you identify the marker or emotions, that is also another point where you can put a stop. And the emotions turns into actions. Your actions could be based on your emotion. If you are anger, your action will be being angry. If your hatred is your emotion, then the action will be based on that particular emotion. If happiness is your emotion, your action will be happy. You go and hug somebody. Okay. So basically in this entire chain from stimulus to action, there are at least 3 areas where you can expand the gap. Stimulus and cue. Stimulus and cue, you cannot really do that because it is already happening in a subconscious mind. It is not coming to your cortex or cortex mind. I mean, they call it dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That is where the decisions being taken, okay, in the whole brain. So it is not going to happen there. So between stimulus and cue, forget about it. Between cue, at the time of cue, you can identify whether this is the real cue or not. That could be an exaggerated cue. So before it reaches the thought, you can identify it is an exaggerated cue, it's an obsolete cue, it's an absent cue, or it's a useless cue, whatever it is. And then then it becomes the thought. So thought you can control. Your thought, you have absolute control on your thought because you are the one who is making the thought. But again, the thought arises. The thought arises from your vasana. You have to stand behind from a different vantage point and look at your thought and say, hey, I don't need this. This is not what I mean or what the stimulus says. So you deconstruct your cue, you deconstruct your thought. Then once you deconstruct your thought and control your thought, I hate to use the word control actually. It is basically tame your thought, then your emotions are tamed. Once your emotions are tamed, no action. Absolutely no action, or only positive actions will come out of that. So you're happy, you're no absolutely no problem, and you're in the dhara. There is a slogan in Bhagavad Gita. It goes like this: Tribidam naragasyedam dwaram nashanatmanah. Tribidam naragasyedam dwaram nashanatmanah. That means Tribidam naragasyedam, the doors of hell, dwaram nashanatmanah. There are three doors to hell which leads you to hell. Three doors, okay? It says Kama Krodha Stadha Lobha Tasmadeda Trayam Tyajet. Kama Krodha Stadha Lobha. There are only three doors to hell. It's very important sloga. Chapter 16, verse 24. Tasmadeda Trayam Tyajet. Trividam Naragasyeda Dwaram Nashanatmanaha. Kama, Krodha, Stadha, Lobha, Tasmadeda, Trayam Tyajet. All these three you have to get rid if you want to be in the dhara. So what are these three? Kama, Krodha, Lobha. This is the we can reduce it to the any criminal activities or any activities, any hellish activities, you can reduce it into these three. Kama, Krodha, Lobha. Kama is desire. It can be lust. Any kind of desire. Desire for food or desire for wealth. Whatever it is. I'm not talking about the positive desire. Positive desire is actually aligned with the dhara. That's a different thing altogether. This is kama, desire, the negative desires. Desires to achieve wealth in a wrong way. Desires for lust for somebody which is something which is not you coming your way. And the second one is krodha. Krodha is anger. And the third one is lobha. Lobha is greed. I am challenging you. You step into any jail, any prison in this world. And can you find a person who has not come to the jail, not through any of these three doors? If it's a financial crime, it is lobha, obviously. If it is a criminal, other criminal activities, murder or something, it is krodha, obviously. Then there is rape and other things which are not even stealing and things which is coming out of kama, desire. So these are the three doorways to hell. So you are opening your own doorway to hell. That is what there is also saying that in Bhagavad Gita that Atma, our own Atma is our own ripu, enemy. Atmaiva Atmano ripu, Atmaiva Ripuratmana. Atmaihi Atmano ripu, Atmaiva Ripuratmana. We are our own enemy, and we don't need any other enemy in our life. Okay, so we ourselves are opening this door to hell. That's what is happening. So basically that is the action. The action, if you take it back, action, emotions, thoughts, cue, and stimuli. So this action which led you to open the door of the hell is because of your emotions, bad emotions, wrong emotions. So the point is that to be in the dhara, you have to control these emotions, you have to tame the emotions, and that is one of the major things. Is metta thinking is one of the tools that I'm trying to say. But how to achieve metta thinking? Our thoughts arise. It's called default mode network. Even if you're sitting nothing, the neurologists call it DFN, default mode network. That means it automatically comes. The thoughts keeps on coming, arises from your vasana, from your subconscious mind, from whatever you accumulated during your life. So many years you live, it comes out of that. Vasanas rises. So to control your thought, basically you are beyond your thought, beyond your body, beyond your mind. That is the concept of dhara. So, but how do you identify your true self? So there is also in Shaivism, there is the one which I really like the most is that about Shiva. Shiva is your ultimate self, because every individual is Shiva according to Kashmiri Shaivism. So we are part of Shiva, but we have to be unite with the Shiva as a whole, the final. Then if we understand, if you know mathematics, I mean that means it is integration, integral 0 to infinity love is Shiva. Sorry, integral 0 to infinity love is Shiva. Integral 0 to infinity gratitude is also Shiva. Integral 0 to infinity happiness is Shiva, of course. That is ultimate happiness, bliss, Paramananda, Satchidananda. So integral 0 to infinity, your gratitude, your whatever good things you're doing to your life, okay, you're doing to others, that all leads you to Shiva. So Swashakti Vikase to Shivayava, that is what they say in Kashmiri Shaivism. I am Shakti Daridra Samsari Uchyade, Swashakti Vikase to Shivayava. Because we have energy, our energy is being we are poor in energy. That is what we have to live in the samsara. But I am Swayam Shakti, so Shakti Vikase. When you expand our Shakti, that is the Parvati, that is the Ardhanarishwara concept. When you expand our Shakti, we become Shiva themselves. So the true self is actually through this expansion process. Only you can see that through the expansion process. So to have the expansion process, we have no other tools other than our body and mind. So we need a proper body-mind balancing to get into this Shivahood or ultimate self or true self or God or whatever name you want to call it. And this happens only in the Dhara. That is what we are coming to another Dhara. If you stand in the turbulence and you want to become Shiva, you will never become Shiva even if you live, you rebirth of thousands of hundreds of thousands of years or times. It happens only when you are completely aligned with the ultimate self or your own true self. I am Swashakti Vikase to Shiva Eva. That means our own true self is becoming Shiva. Okay. So, for this you have to use your Ubadhi. Your Ubadhi is your body and mind. So, using the Ubadhi, body and mind, there is various methods of doing it. Okay. So, one of the methods is that you must have heard about chakras. The chakra activation, balancing of chakras actually can expand your energy and you can rise your Kundalini and then you can reach there. But I want to keep a little bit of a disclaimer here. There are no chakras existing in the body because we are all rational animals, so super rational animals. We already immediately reject it. Say that okay, this is all cow shit. There are no chakras in the body. There are no chakras in the body. Absolutely right. So, but you have to know your body. Basically what happens is that our body, what we know about the body is only our conscious control of the body is very limited. Our motor neurons, which helps us to consciously control the body. And the major part what is happening in the body is not with our control. Even the activities of cell, fighting a cell which is fighting within, against rising immunity, the cell which is fighting against the intruders into the body, are we knowing about it? No, we don't know about it because that is individual cell has got its own memory, its own intelligence and it is doing that. So, whatever you consciously know about your body is very, very limited. That's where the chakras comes in. Chakra activation actually, you will get more control to your body, more control to the activities which is in your body. So, that means you can use this as an Ubadhi to rise beyond this. That is what Kundalini says. The Kundalini rise says you already controlled your entire body. You controlled your parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. You control your sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system is controlled through your vagus nerve. You can control your heartbeat. You control your blood pressure. All those things which is happening without your knowledge because it's part of the homeostasis of the body. So, chakra stimulation and Sahasrara chakra and the Kundalini rising is actually basically simply speaking, it is just managing your body. Then prana. Prana is actually the energy which is you're getting from outside. You are born with the first step. You came to this world with an inhalation and you leave from this world with a single exhalation. Okay. Being said this, now we go to a couple of practices. I will just show you two practices how to get this body and mind in control. And so that you can be in the Dhara, whatever I have been saying about the theory part of it. Okay, so one practice is pranayama, very simple pranayama, because you cannot do everything in 1 hour, of course not, but at least to give you a flavor of what is this pranayama, and the other one is a short meditation. So, okay, this meditation is called Indriya Samyama Yajna meditation. So Indriya means sense organs, 5 senses. Samyama means restrained. I wouldn't like to say control. I hate the word control for some reasons. It's taming the indriyas, taming the mind through taming the indriyas, through using the indriyas, not taming the mind using the indriyas. This is one of the very powerful meditation techniques which is elaborated in many of the ancient Indian texts like Vijnana Bhairava Tantra of Shaivism and of course Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter. This method is mentioned. So Indriya Samyama Yajna meditation. Indriya, senses, samyama, restraint, yajna means offering to your true self. Okay, so we have 5 indriyas. These are the 5 gateways of information which is coming from outside. We have discussed that already. 5 gateways through which the stimuli which are coming. Okay, so they are 1, ear. Indriya is ear. The tanmatra is sound. Indriya is nose. Tanmatra is smell. Indriya is tongue. Tanmatra is taste. Indriya is touch and tanmatra is Indriya is skin and tanmatra is touch, and the Indriya is eye, the tanmatra is vision. So these are the 5 ones. So what we are going to do is that First of all, in any meditation, you have to sit straight. Okay, I'm sitting in a chair. You could preferably sit in the floor with a folded legs if possible. If you're practicing yoga, then it'll be easy for you. So sit comfortably. When you sit comfortably, make sure your back is straight and the shoulder is slightly back, and the hand is preferably go to chin mudra. This is chin mudra, your thumb and the index finger together, which says you're closing the prana within the body. Okay, it is not allowed to escape. Your energy is not, you're not allowing energy to escape while doing the meditation. That is what we do the chin mudra. There are different types of mudras. You can do the Brahma mudra or different types of mudra, but let us, because it's a demonstration class, let us only do the chin mudra. Keep the your, let me go a little bit backward so you can see me properly. Okay, so chin mudra on your thighs or the knees, wherever it reaches, and of course you have to close your eyes. So what I'm first, now let us listen first. Okay, so in this posture, what you should do is, first I will instruct you to choose the indriyas. If I say, okay, now your indriya is krana or ear, let's just talk in English, ear, and listen to, I'll give you the instructions, listen to the sounds or whatever. Then I'll give you a gap, a complete silence without instructions. So that time you have to follow whatever instructions I've given. Okay. Then we switch the indriya. After some time I'll say, okay, now go to your touch. Feel the pressure of your body, whether where you're sitting, where whatever touch, you touch between your fingers, touch between your body, whatever touch, focus on all the touch and go around. Then I give again silence for some time so you can focus on that. Then we come to smell. So just follow the smell, again instructions, silence. Then comes to taste, so you can use your tongue for the taste, again instruction, silence. And then comes to the netrendriya, the eye. You should don't open your eyes, just look at the red color in the, again instructions. Okay, so when you do this on the 5 indriyas and then stop everything, try to get out of all the indriyas in the last phase, maybe for a few seconds. I'll give you the instructions and then silence. And after that silence, I'll just click and then ask you to open your eyes, rub your palms together, warm up, then comes back. We'll do it for maybe 5 minutes or whatever, because normally meditations can go up to hours, and I do it every day. Not this particular meditation, my sadhana for 2 hours every day morning, including an hour of meditation. So we can gradually increase this. So this is one of the best way to tame your mind. Okay, so let us start that. Okay, now sit, as I told you, you can sit comfortably the way your back erect and shoulder a little bit backward, hand on chin mudra on your shoulder, on your knees. Close your eyes. Close your eyes and listen to me. Take a deep breath in and exhale fully. Please make sure you close your eyes. Another deep breath in and exhale fully. Now we are taking your ear and sound as the indriya. Just focus on the sound in the room you're sitting. Try not to activate any other indriyas, just sound. Listen to the sound in your room. Listen to the sound beyond your room. Try to gather some sound which is coming from far away. Keep listening to the sound. Keep focusing on the sound. Nothing else, just sound. Your ears are open. Only the sounds are coming in. My sound, the sound of the AC or the fan in your room, the sound from outside your window. Just listen to the sound. Just listen. Don't attach any emotions to the stimuli. Don't attach any emotions to the sound which is coming in. Just listen. Dispassionate listening. Now slowly and gradually focus your attention to your nose. Feel the air going in and out. You're inhaling, feel the hot air going through the nose, cold air, and exhale, hot air outside. Try to pick up the smell from the surroundings. Focus on the smell, nothing else. Just focus on the smell. Don't attach any emotions to the smell. Just dispassionate smelling. Shift your attention to your skin, the pressure points in your body, right from your feet, go up wherever your body is touching with other objects or even to other body parts. Focus on all the pressure points of your body and the skin, one after another, like a cycle. Go up and go down, starting from the feet, go up, from the top, come down, one by one. Just focusing on the touch. Don't focus on anything else. Touch. Dispassionate touch. Shift the focus of your attention to your tongue. Inside your mouth, slowly move your tongue. Feel the saliva, feel the taste. Just your tongue, nothing else. Just keep focusing there. Shift your attention to your eyes. Don't open your eyes. And look in front of your eyes. You can see a red screen. Focus on that screen. Nothing else. Dispassionately. If you're seeing any images, that is fine. But don't attach any emotions to that. Just keep looking at the eyelids, closed eyelids. Okay, now rub your hands together. Cup your eyes. Open the eyes. Okay, so this is a Indriya Samyama Yajna meditation. One of the very, just to give a flavor of it, I was just talking one of the meditation. So this is what is, you are focusing on your Indriyas and then tuning to your Indriyas. So what happens is if you focus on one, all the others have been shut down or reduce activity. So you're cutting down the stimulus which is coming from outside. So this is one of the methods of meditation. There are various methods of meditation that depends on the situation and the time. You can do many meditations. So meditation is one of the major tools to control your mind. Okay, now let's go to the Q&A session. Question and answer. Thank you.